Mayor de Blasio presented an $89.06 billion executive budget proposal Thursday, a budget that has grown $1 billion since his February proposal as the city faces down what he called a bad year in the state capital. "We had a bad year in Albany, in fact the worst year since 2011, de Blasio told reporters Thursday in the City Hall Blue Room. The city was forced to make up for $530 million it either was required to give to the state government or was expecting to get from it and did not, de Blasio said. That included $254 million the city put up for the MTA's subway rescue plan, state education funding that came in at $140 million less than the city had projected, $108 million the city will need to spend to implement what it called the unfunded mandate of the governor's initiative to raise the age of criminality, and $31 million to pick up the tab for the Close to Home initiative, formerly funded by the state. To put it in perspective, about 25% of all new city spending in this budget is because of the need to compensate for cuts and cost shifts that came out of the Albany budget, so about $1 in $4 new in this budget is to compensate for those actions, de Blasio. Gov. Cuomo's office disputed de Blasio's numbers. Shockingly, the mayor's math is wrong, spokesman Rich Otsoparty said, adding that the city would receive more education aid than it had last year, and that the state's contributions to the MTA's capital plan dwarfs all his other complaints. De Blasio also sounded caution about the potential fiscal unknowns of Cuomo's executive order to install a monitor at the New York City Housing Authority, though this budget does not account for it yet. "We see a very challenging and potentially dangerous element of it in terms of our budget," de Blasio said. "There's some very open-ended language in the executive order which could result in the city having to incur a substantial additional cost that cannot go through our budget process, that the council doesn't get to vote on, that I as mayor have no control over nor does the city controller." Otsoparty noted the state has promised $550 million for NYCHA, and said the city could face worse financial outlays thanks to a federal investigation. The NYCHA order will be adjusted once the federal investigation of the city concludes to see if he is culpable in the NYCHA malfeasance and what penalty the city will be forced to pay on his behalf, he said. "That is the great unknown. Not all of the budget hike, more than $1 billion over the mayor's February proposal, and $3.86 million more than the budget adopted last June, can be traced to Albany. The executive budget for fiscal 2019 adds another $159 million in homeless services, on top of an $150 million addition that was included in the preliminary version of the budget released in February. In addition, for the second time in recent months, the city is adding more money into homeless services in the fiscal year already underway, another $186 million, on top of $150 million added earlier this year. De Blasio said the costs were related to his plan to get the homeless out of cluster apartments, which has resulted in putting them in costly hotels, and because of a spike in single men coming into shelter, who are more expensive to house than families who can live together. Those expenses will decrease as the new shelters in the plan are being built, he argued. "We want to believe, based on what we've seen, this could be the last major increase in investment," he said. Council Speaker Corey Johnson called the increase rapid, and said he was concerned. "We also have seen the population remain flat, so we want to see the population go down," he said. "And given that we are now spending billions of dollars on DHS and homeless services, we need to not just manage homelessness but reduce homelessness." The budget proposal includes new expenses like $125 million in fair student funding, sought by the City Council. $41 million for cybersecurity, $30.5 million for literacy efforts to get kids on grade level by third grade, $20 million over 2 years for NYCHA maintenance, and $12 million for social workers to support homeless students who live in city shelters. The budget also makes an investment aimed at curbing parking placard abuse by city officials, a $2 million online parking permit system to enable better enforcement, the city said. And in the separate expense budget, the city is earmarking $103 million to roll out 3,000 new permanent security barriers to protect pedestrians from cars, which comes after October's terrorist attack on a West Side Highway bike path and a 2017 incident when a driver mowed down pedestrians in Times Square before eventually being stopped by a bollard. But budget doesn't include several of the big asks from the City Council: fair fares, which provide half-priced Metro cards for low-income New Yorkers, a property tax rebate, or increases in the city's reserves. The mayor says he wants us to be the fairest city in America. Part of the way to do that is to implement fair fares, Johnson said. But de Blasio said he was concerned about the price tag. Now we're going to go into negotiations, he said of the council asks. And we will talk about each of those, while reserves will remain flat. De Blasio also touted what he said would be $754 million in savings in the city budget, which come from a partial hiring freeze, efficiencies at city agencies and re-estimates of the city's debt service. The budget also contains no money for the Brooklyn-Queens connector, better known as the BQX. That's despite de Blasio's insistence that the news reporting on its uncertain future is inaccurate.